Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, April 10th, 2023 meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. I'm Chair Barry Bialik. And I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote of everyone who's here. I think you can just say hi when I call your name. Margie?
Hi, Margie Bukowski.
Don't see it. Emily?
Oh, sorry. Emily Axtman.
Andy?
Here.
David?
Here, David Bartholomew.
Chris?
Here, Chris Day.
Paul?
Paul Heathman is here.
Tara?
Tara Irby here.
Brian?
Brian Metzman here.
Nwena?
And Wayna's here.
And let's see, if I didn't see is Scott, Dewana, or Babs. Okay. And we have city staff joining us, Sasha and Kevin there. Welcome, everybody. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. They're in our package. Has everyone had a chance to review? And if so, do I have a motion to accept?
I had one. I saw one. There was just a grammatical error in there. On the events, news, and reminders, it says none at the meeting instead of with no G. As an engineer, when I ever do see something that I can find, I'm usually not the best with my grammar or things like that. So just make note of that. Otherwise, I will approve as noted. Motion for approval.
A second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. Moving on. So we've got up on our agenda to elect new officers. We've had some long discussion on it, and I think we've changed our bylaws to allow for having co-chairs. Are we ready? Are we ready to nominate people? Are we prepared? Brian, I know you've led some of this. You want to kind of share where we're at and if we're ready for this?
I think it's, I believe there's couple of people willing to be co-chairs.
Okay.
Can you speak into your microphone?
Sorry, I believe there's several people that are prepared to be co-chairs.
Okay.
Margie, you wanted to be a co-chair, and Andy had volunteered. Who else had volunteered? Is there other people who?
Is there anybody else that's volunteer? That's all I know about for sure. Is there anyone else? Does anyone else on the committee want to volunteer to be a co-chair, or what is the other?
Vice chair.
A vice
A
chair.
vice chair.
So we can take that into account.
I think, Brian, you offered to do vice chair?
Yeah, I will do vice chair.
Okay. Great. Is there anybody else that would be interested before I close? I guess we could close this out and elect. Is there anyone else who has any interest in being vice chair? No. Anybody else who has interest in being co-chair? No. So do we have what's the process?
Somebody should make a motion.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to that with our bylaw changes, we're allowed to have co-chairs, and AHAC appoints Margie Bukowski and Andy Barnett as co-chairs and Brian Methvin as vice chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion we want to have on that? All in favor? I'll do a roll call vote. Nope, I don't need to. Okay, I don't need to do a roll call vote. Okay, all in favor? Everyone say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Any opposed? Good, motion carries. Thank you, appreciate that, everybody. All right, next up on the agenda is Luigi policy and micro units. Do we want to, and then there's the voucher follow-up. Is there any, since they're kind of connected, do we want to switch the order? Or
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't put
Sure.
one thing on your agenda. Can we talk about your meeting time super quick?
Sure.
So City Council was doing their in-person agenda briefings in this room at your meeting time. So, or just like halfway through your meeting time, we'd have to clear out. So this is why we've been meeting at these not regular times. They have since decided to go virtual to help with attendance and help themselves get to those meetings. So they will be starting at, I believe, 11 o'clock on that first Thursday. So we can meet here at your regular time. It means that if we start at 9:30, there's a little bit of overlap with that meeting, which is okay. I sometimes have to go to those meetings, but maybe not enough to worry about. And so we can go back to your regular time, and I guess the question is, would it be easier for some folks if that, is 9:30 the right time, or would 9 o'clock be better for some people?
9 would be better for me, but 9:30. Yeah. either
Anybody else have,
People are kind of.
sticking it, so basically leaving it at Thursday.
Yep.
Is everyone cool with Thursday?
What would be the first, what would be the next meeting date?
May. Sorry.
Like 11th?
May 4th. So it's still the first Thursday, May 4th.
May the 4th? be with you?
Star Wars Day.
Nice.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm flexible. I guess I'd prefer 9. It could be flexible for anyone who prefers 9:30.
Will that make it easier on you, Sasha, to have it at 9 so that you don't have to?
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's regular enough conflict that it's fine. Whatever works best for the committee is better.
But they're going to do all virtual.
They're doing all virtual.
9 makes it easier for some.
Okay.
Did we say we didn't have a virtual or hybrid option? We couldn't?
We don't have a hybrid option.
Okay.
At some point in the future, we think we might, but we're not there yet, technology-wise. So.
So it sounds like the Thursday works. The question is whether we look to go 9 or 9:30. Is there any, is there anyone that, how about this? Is there anyone that only 9 o'clock works?
I'm flexible.
And is there anyone that really only 9:30 works?
No, I just prefer it.
What's that?
I said no, I just prefer 9:30. I have to drop off children and get to the office and come in.
Yeah, that's always been, 9:30's always been, I've always pushed for that. Like, I think I changed it to 9:30 because I have kids, I have to get to school. But y'all are taking over chair, so you get to say this. So 9:30's always been my preference for that reason, but I can, you guys need to make this decision, so
Yeah, for future members too, like with children, when you're recruiting new members, it'd be nice to be aware of potential children dropouts.
and the traffic, I find it's like you're in between the traffic splashes coming downtown, so there's less competition.
Terry, you said 9 is better for you. Is 9:30
Yeah,
possible?
9:30 is not a problem. I was just saying, I thought we were public. 9:30 is fine.
We want to just leave it the way the meeting is, and then y'all, if you want to vote to change it afterwards, yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's leave everything the way it was on a regular schedule, and then y'all can decide to change it moving forward if you want.
Sasha, had you already sent out a meeting request for that date?
There's a standing one
Okay.
that's sitting there, but I didn't delete them all
Okay, cool.
because I thought we might be able to go back, so I just left it
Sweet,
there.
it's already there, that's great.
Okay, is that good? Cool. Okay, so then in the old business, so there's the voucher follow-up, and then Luigi, we kind of asked, we had last meeting, a discussion and kind of get to understand vouchers better, so then we can use that information for making some decisions or discussions about the Luigi policy and micro units. Just one thing, did I hear at HCD that the Luigi discussion is going to get held off and tied in with the bigger affordable housing, or is that?
Yes and no. So basically, I met with the developer of the 46 Aston micro units, micro apartments, 2-3 weeks ago. We had a long discussion, and I'm just gonna be totally honest with you all. I have not had time to really do what I need to do on this. I have some thoughts for you today, but, it just may need to be more, the work may need to be spread out and help, if you all can help more. Because I'm just not, it wasn't in my work plan, I'm just not getting there. So, David said, yes, sure, we can push off HCD another month, so we're not time pressured today to come up with solutions. What you're talking about is there's a larger question at City Council about Luigi policy in general. So we are getting ready to release an RFP in the next few weeks for our affordable housing plan. Looking at Luigi is included in that, and how, how's it been performing? Should we make tweaks to it? What are the recommendations in the scope of like the big picture of all the tools? Is that where we should be putting our money? Should we be putting our money into something else entirely? If that makes sense. Or not, I mean, it's.
So with that then, because we were kind of given some guidance to work on Luigi, and then the last meeting I heard that it sounded like what I was picking up on, instead of that, it was going to be put into the RFP for an affordable housing plan to look at Luigi. So then, in that vein, should we spend so much time discussing it if it's going to be?
The charge right now is about micro apartments, so that's different. Does that make sense?
But we also had in our work plan to do Luigi
Yes.
policy.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Not for a few more months. But that's why it was this summer.
Okay.
I was kind of pushing it a little bit later.
Okay, that was kind of the new. It's like we had kind of in our work plan to start talking about Luigi because we were asked, but it's what I picked up on last time is that was going to be more included in the scope of the affordable housing plan update, our request. So in that vein, like I know we always get frustrated when we work on stuff that.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything you do or collect now, I mean, we can work it into feeding to the consultant, right?
Yeah.
Like I agree, like you don't want to spin your wheels or do things you shouldn't do, but
Yeah.
At the same time, any public input or any community input you got, we will still feed to the consultant. It won't go by the wayside.
So who is this consultant? I mean.
We haven't released an RFP yet.
Yeah, okay, so it's what.
So the goal is to get to, I was hoping to get to council before the end of the budget year. But because we're asking, frankly, because we're asking Dogwood for some of the funding for it, we really need to wait till we get their decision, which won't be till the first week of July. So then puts us going to council in July with that, so we're releasing the RFP, doing interviews, doing all this process. And so hopefully we hear positive news from Dogwood, and then we would go to city council with a contract ready to go.
Once the selection is made, do we interact with the consultant?
I was thinking there'd be an advisory committee that AHAC would be a part of. There will be stakeholder groups. There'll be all kinds of ways to interact with them for sure.
Should we put it on, continue to discuss it in our next meetings so that we can get our thoughts out?
That's fine. I also think, there's a question, this hasn't been said to me by council, but I also think there's also could be a question of like, well, why will we wait for these recommendations? Should we just continue to take these applications, or should we, I think there's some level of discomfort with Luigi we're hearing at the council level. And so, there could be some temporary action. There could be like, we're only going to hear Luigi applications twice a year or 4 times a year. We're going to kind of put these into some kind of timed boxes, which doesn't necessarily always work with CZs, but I don't know. I guess all I'm telling you is what I know is that there's a level of discomfort. I think council will be could be looking to staff for some ideas. I think we could also talk about big picture, but maybe even in the immediate term, like, well, we should only really maybe approve this much Luigi per year, if that makes sense, because it's draining our future tax base, right? So, which provides our core services. So while housing is wonderful, we want to encourage it, we want to subsidize affordable housing, we want to encourage all of that. At the same time, we have to be super careful about how much future tax dollars we're committing.
Is
Does
there
that
a
make
view
sense?
that it's creating more tax revenue? It's an investment.
But it doesn't because you're paying back the taxes.
What-
You're not, so right now, like if you look at the future, if you look at the spreadsheet of all the taxes we've committed to $15 million of future tax money that we won't be able to collect for years and years. Is that
Yeah.
total? That's total over
Yeah.
year. So it's not 20 million, it's not 15 a year, but it's maybe like close to $1 million every year
For
for affordable housing.
10 years
But-
No,
so-
for 20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we had come up with, there's several things about Luigi. When we were asked about the parties, we came up with a couple of things. We talked about like for how to make it work for smaller projects, how to tie this. There's a few things we had kind of gone back and forth, like when we were asked about what should we be talking about Luigi, and just more, I guess I'm trying to figure out like how much time we should spend on some of those
Right.
things that the feeling I've been getting from listening to HD and watching the council members with it is that there's a question of is this worth it versus giving up versus just having the tax dollars. I've heard that exact term, like, well, should we do this or should we just keep the tax dollars? Is that kind of what you're hearing?
I'm not hearing that specific.
Okay.
I don't disagree. I haven't heard specific feedback.
Okay.
But I think we need to know, is that going to turn off some developers? Because if there is new Luigi, and, what other incentive is there going to be for them?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
for sure. I
That's-
mean, there's
that's
definitely two
it's
sides of the.
Big deal.
yeah, it's definitely a big, like, having gone through now a housing trust fund application, like, so what we did, like, just one thing, like, what we did is by reallocating bond monies into housing trust fund, we made all of the bond money have to be returnable funds. It's all a loan, nothing can technically be granted. So that left Luigi as one of the only, like, tools, I think, is that right? It's kind of left as one of the only tools that is actual, in some way, a grant, because it's an actual rebate. We have a fee rebate program that I don't know if it's been used in a while, but it kind of, I think it's been a successful tool.
I also think that, that's the kind of thing that other locations also have, and they use that. And is that going to be a detriment to our location if we don't have that tool?
So the issue right now in front of you is HCD requested, just as a reminder, I know you all know this, but some advice on micro apartments, how they should be treated under the Luigi policy.
Okay.
And I don't mean to give you the feeling the entire council's against Luigi. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I haven't polled them, I have no idea. I can't speak for them.
Yeah.
Not the entire, or some of the council members against it.
Well, it goes through,
I
it
don't
goes
know
through
who- I
HCD,
just-
so
I don't know.
really, you
There's a
really see it
discomfort,
through the
that's what I
filter
was
of
saying.
3. You really see everything through the filter of 3, but having watched some of the it's like, if you watch the HCD meetings and you see the discussions about Luigi, there's definitely this question that's been raised about tax, about future, like, should we be giving up future tax revenue, or maybe I'd rather just have the future tax revenue. But I guess that's also where we as an advisory committee can also make a motion, say, hey, we think Luigi's a great tool, so we want, we as an advisory committee want to continue this, and these are our recommendations for it. So, but I just always, I always, whenever we see this stuff that we're charged to work on, and we see some flux on it, it always raises, hackles, and like, oh. So.
Yeah, I understand.
So, okay. But I guess the issue at charge, let's talk about the voucher, let's hit the voucher follow-up.
So in your folders, so in your folders, there's some notes from our discussion last month, and I asked HACA staff to address some remaining questions, and in those notes, and I haven't had time to fully digest all of this, but they answered some questions and added info, which is great. So they added some breakdowns of income for project-based vouchers and tenant-based vouchers.
One thing that was really helpful, one thing I noticed was really helpful from the last meeting and understanding the technical about the project-based and the not project-based is there's an application going through for it's a project on Sweeten Creek, I believe it is, and they've been approved for project-based vouchers so that, that basically it means it's a lot more voucher availability for those, is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
From reading through the notes, does anyone have additional, like, questions they want to ask or understand better? I mean, from the notes, these look really helpful.
So just for a quick bit of clarification, project-based voucher, that's a given, I guess it's a given physical location, either something new and up and coming or an existing thing, and tenant-based is I'm trying to put it quickly in my mind, it's a bit more flexible in that it's with the individual tenant applied, I guess, wherever they can find the receptive unit. Okay.
Project-based vouchers are great because somebody else want to fill that. I mean, I think they're really good for, if we have a project that works out with the housing authority to have project-based voucher, which they're doing with 319 Biltmore, for example.
Mm.
We know that there are a certain number of units that will always accept vouchers there.
Right, so it's a bit more predictable in that
It's more
sense.
predictable. It's actually really good. It's helpful for developers because it helps them in their financing. The bank knows there's this guaranteed income stream too.
They incent creation of units, whereas the other maybe never get used, right? If they can't find units.
Yeah, you don't have the guarantee in a way that they'll be used.
Is there any, what is the deal gonna be with the developers and saying you must accept X% of vouchers? Are they going to, is that gonna be project to project? Is that gonna be, I mean, the
No, you-
number of vouchers that they have to, are you,
Which program are you talking about, Luigi, or what are you talking about?
I'm talking about just accepting vouchers in general for developers.
I think like if someone submits an application for whatever, whether it's Housing Trust Fund or Region, they say they're going to accept vouchers, unless it's previously approved as a project-based, it's assuming it has to be a tenant-based voucher, is that?
I think, going back to Margie's question, I mean, that's completely up to the city in terms of city funding, correct?
Right, the requirements.
Right, if there are requirements, and I don't know that there are steadfast requirements at this point, correct?
Right, it's just the accepting part right now. But that's been a question that's been raised
Yeah,
by
so I
council
guess I
members
was
for sure.
asking
And
if that had
here.
gotten any further down the line, because I had the feeling that they were going to, I don't say force, but say you must accept this percentage of, if you're gonna accept vouchers, then you have to have this many. But I think that's all very, it's difficult to say based on each project is different.
And remind me, just in terms of language or programs, these are separate and independent from housing choice vouchers, is that?
They're all housing choice.
Okay, it is
Yeah.
all, it's
Yeah.
just nomenclature
Yeah.
then.
These are, were you last month's?
I missed last
So
meeting,
the biggest thing, Scott, that came up is that, like, one of the biggest questions was like, is this an unlimited amount? Like, what if someone came and I'm gonna build 5,000, I'd offer 5,000 spaces, that the vouchers don't exist for all that. So there's some things, that what we're trying to make sure is that we're driving to create projects that actually the vouchers exist for, or else it's not like this unlimited amount where the funding will just making vouchers, and then there's a limited amount of project-based vouchers,
Okay.
which are, project-based vouchers means going into housing authority developments or developments that have been approved by the housing authority as project-based, is that?
That's correct.
Okay. And then any other project, like a lot of these Luigi applications that we're seeing are not, they can't accept project-based vouchers, they have to accept tenant-based vouchers.
Okay. The
And to
portability.
get a tenant-based voucher, you have to have lived in a housing development, and after you've lived in it for
A year.
a while, then you can apply for it. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's those ones that are unused. A lot of those unused are people who are currently they live in housing authority developments, and they have tenant base to move, but there's no option.
That's the larger issue is, I
Yeah.
mean, you may have your voucher in hand, but
Yeah.
the availability of the housing is not there.
Yeah,
Okay,
and why
that's-
this comes up with the tiny units is like, because this is why the conversation got connected, is because he was proposing
Everything.
40, I think there was like 46, there's like 42, 46
Right.
of his units he would accept vouchers for, so, and the connection from Housing Authority came from David Nash had come out and said, that's a great thing, like the more
Yeah.
capable people, so that was kind of why this discussion on vouchers connected to,
Yeah.
the weeds about micro units, because
Sure.
it's filling a need that is there, and then how do we try to create policy that encourages the creation of the units that fill the need?
Gotcha, yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, yeah, on the face of it, it is an available unit for said voucher. I guess it's just the debate about the
Yeah,
size of the unit or what have you.
yeah. Does anyone, any other voucher questions? Because we have people who can help answer. I learned a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, we all did.
No?
And I think I remember David saying that, in some conversation, that his greatest need for vouchers was still one-bedroom apartments.
Yeah, we have, we provided the breakdown, here. What is the bedroom mix demand? And, you can look on the PPV wait list, project-based voucher wait list, and see there in the one bedroom that it's more than double the next, unit size. And so, yeah, that is in fact true.
For definitions of either, unit size or whatnot, is the city working off of is it just it's a bedroom reportage, or is it an actual is it a fixed or required square footage per unit?
No, there's no square footage.
Okay. I mean, and again, I was not here for the last meeting and the last discussion, but I guess in just kind of quick bit of food for thought on micro units, if you're looking at it, I guess on a square footage basis, if you're going on the assumption of 220 to 250 square feet, give or take, of said unit, I don't know if you're counting in any common element of, a hall, bathroom, or a kitchen, like something like that, but that's just, one quick thought I would have if you are trying to semi-standardize or assign an average square footage per micro unit studio. I mean, I'm thinking 250, 500, 1,000, 1,500, something like that. That at least gives you, in the conversation, some starting point of saying, okay, if your micro unit on average is a quarter the size of let's call it a global one bedroom at, I don't know, yeah, call it that. That might be I think it's a starting point of a discussion of either proportionality or just some degree of predictability if you are trying to make it, I guess, index to the actual size of the unit. Because I guess that's and again, food for thought, the question that's come up of, okay, one micro unit, that's, one unit is one unit versus one bedroom, that's one unit. So for the purposes of the voucher, hey, I've got a voucher, you've got a unit to match it to, albeit micro unit is smaller. So I guess maybe that's the discussion of, okay, if you're giving 100% credit to a full-size one-bedroom unit, would you give a portion of that to a micro unit? And it's just, I guess it's a question.
Portion of the tax benefit?
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Just, the proportionality of the size of it, I guess, is the question that's come up.
Yeah, I mean, for tax credit projects, NCHFA determines they tell you what your one-bedroom square footage is.
Right.
And so, or two-bedroom, whatever. And so you have to, you have, I think about that. Is
Yeah.
that, if it's 700 square feet, then here we have 200 square feet.
Yeah, so it's.
It doesn't seem like, I think they should get something. I'm just thinking, what portion of that should they get?
Right, and that's, at least in terms of looking at something that's semi-objective or proportional or predictable, that seems like I think a reasonable discussion, so.
Is the vouchers, so if the voucher, there's are there separate one-bedroom vouchers and separate studio vouchers?
No, I don't believe that's the case.
Okay.
I think it is just one bedroom is the lowest,
Okay.
square footage and by way of square footage, and we don't talk in terms of square footage, but, studio and one bedroom will probably be considered the same.
Yeah,
But
Because
is the payment standard the same? That's my question. I'm wondering.
I don't think so.
Because I
I'm
know
not
for.
certain. I'm not certain.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
gonna
they're
look-
different,
I'm
aren't
looking
they?
different.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure HUD has a separate studio rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have, yes, there is a 0-bedroom payment standard.
Yeah.
So right now, Asheville Housing payment standard for 0-bedroom, oh wait, that's 22. In 2022 is 1307, and the new one is 1397. So your voucher could pay pretty close to 1,400.
That was for a studio or one bedroom?
Studio.
Oh, wow. Okay.
1 bedroom, it's 1,557.
Isn't
They
that
just-
including utilities? Yeah, some of these
Not sure.
vouchers you have to include into utilities.
I know that, yeah, I know there's utility allowances.
so I guess what I'm hearing is that, at least for the voucher, it's agnostic on the unit size, it's just the unit assignment of its studio, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, right?
Yeah, that's what my understanding is, that the voucher, the housing, there's two separate, like the housing choice voucher is agnostic to size unit, whether it's just if it's got a bedroom, if it doesn't have a bedroom, then there's a studio pay rate. If it's got one bedroom of any size, as long as it meets probably building code standards,
Yeah.
then it's a one bedroom. And same thing with the two bedroom, if it's a 2-bedroom house that's 580 square feet, it's gonna pay the same as a 2-bedroom that's 1,200 square feet.
Right, okay.
So the question is, no, has that been part of this disconnect question, that vouchers are agnostic to that? And the payment rates are set already by HUD, HUD standards don't define unit square footage, they only define bedroom, no bedroom, amount of bedrooms, and it has nothing to do with the amount of bathrooms, it's only bedrooms. So the question comes in when we're looking at other policies, so here, do we need to, with especially Luigi's, do we take that same agnostic view because a unit is a unit and
Yeah.
a housing choice is a voucher is a voucher, or do we want to further limit that? And that's kind of the discussion that's come back. And then one of the questions that came up, or the points that was brought up last meeting when we started the discussion is that since it's the Luigi credit is based on value, that the value already is, a value is what is scaling the size because
Yeah.
So that was kind of the question. So is this already scaled because it's scaled in future value? Or
Right. Ostensibly, something that's 220 square feet is not going to be as valuable as, say, 5 or 1,000, so.
And I think it's micro, then studio, then one.
Right.
So you've got 3 separate things there that a micro unit is relatively.
Yeah, everything I've seen on micro units, generally 220, 250,
Right.
call it roughly half of a
And your
studio.
studios run around 450 to 500.
Yeah, and to clarify, a micro unit doesn't have a kitchen.
Right.
These are
I mean,
all
it's-
congregate living style, so
Yeah,
I think that's, they
Well,
should
it's-
be looked at differently.
Well, we consider them to have a kitchen because they have a microwave and a sink. So unfortunately, I know it's not a full
Yeah.
kitchen.
Okay.
I will say a couple of
It's a
things.
kitchenette.
Kitchenette. I did ask the developer, just as an example, I know we're not discussing his project, but what is the size of these going to be? And he said 200 to 350 for
okay.
the affordable units. I did in a bunch of looking around at some other projects in other cities, Seattle, Durham even has one. I'll show you an example, but they tend to be larger. I'm not seeing a lot of 200 square foot
Yeah,
units.
it's-
They tend to be closer to at least 300. And what else was I gonna say?
So they've got like a studio that's like 200 and like a one bedroom that's like.
Like a micro
Yeah,
apartment.
micro.
Micros.
Micro apartment at like 300.
What's?
They're
you said-
not
Did you say
offering-
200 to 350?
That's what the Asheville one is saying.
But
For the affordable units, they would be between 200 and 350 square feet.
those units look different. There's some that are 200 and some that
No.
are 350.
Oh,
Are they
yes,
still-
there's different, yeah, there's
Just
a
different
range.
layouts or?
Yeah.
But then the studio typically is 500.
Is that what the standard is? Okay.
Well, the,
So but there's a project in Nashville,
Mhm.
and it has a bunch of 250
That's
square
right.
unit. I mean, on their website, they've got like 5 unit plans that are available, and they range from like 225, and they did
Okay.
have something that were over 300, but most of them were sub 300.
Right.
The other thing I found interesting when I looked at that unit, they had like 10 units available out of 200 for rent. And they're the only thing that's available in downtown Nashville. So just from a commercial perspective, the market must not value them that highly. Because you can't, there's no other apartments within like 3 miles of it that are available for rent. They're 100% occupancy, but those have availability. So that one thing that worries me about using Luigi dollars for projects like that is that I don't know that that's really what people want to live, a large portion of the population wants to live in, and I would hate to make it, to say to people who have vouchers, well, this is what you have to accept, simply because, you know, you're in this situation in life where you need a voucher. So particularly if council is concerned about the Luigi policy in total, I don't know that this is a good, micro units is a good avenue to go down with, for that particular incentive.
Right, it's different. It's,
I mean, I guess if you're, you know, throwing silver buckshot versus a silver bullet, I think it is a part of, you know, it's an all of the above approach. And I suppose kind of going back to the question of either proportionality or size, it's like if you don't want to actively encourage or discourage it, but you at least want to be more proactive and upfront about, you know, hey, it's proportionally this size and this value versus that I think that might be the discussion of not saying, you know, an all or nothing proposition is we'll either, you know, allow use of Luigi for this or not versus, hey, we'll allow it, but it's going to be proportional.
Yeah, it's just micro units by their definition are more affordable than
Sure.
traditional one bedrooms or studios.
Right.
So do you need to give them any incentive versus just the economic model that exists for them already? Because they're using
Yeah.
half the space that a studio would and a third of the space that a one bedroom apartment would. So if I can cram all those units into a building and rent them out for 30% less rent, as a developer, that economic model works without an incentive.
Yeah.
And so it can be in the community mix. I'm not saying we shouldn't have micro units in Asheville. I'm just saying I don't know that we need to use
It's the
taxpayer
best
dollars
use of that.
to subsidize them.
that was where that question, like, if there wasn't Louise, then the building still goes in, and then it doesn't create 46 guaranteed units. That was the thing. It's like the project will probably happen regardless of this or not. So this is really, are we willing to get, like, does the city have a policy that's willing to give something up to get guaranteed units? That's really what it.
Well, the question is, are they guaranteed though? Because simply because you say, I will accept vouchers, doesn't mean vouchers go in. All it says is the rent
Right.
for those 46 units will stay at the approved level.
Yeah.
And I will accept tenants. I'm still doing credit checks, criminal background checks, you know, and I can go in and just pick my 46 people. The units will be affordable and those 46 people will pay lower rent. But it doesn't mean the 46 people we need in our community that need housing, particularly the ones on vouchers.
How does And this came back, like, when we talked about the audit, so, I mean, this is a good question, connecting with the weeds, that how do we say we go back and we audit, like, we have yearly audit reports to make sure that they're being used. So if someone was saying, I'm gonna do this at this rent, and I'm gonna accept 46 units of voucher housing, is Luigi, or the funding tied back into guaranteeing that happens? Or can we? I mean, it seems like that's.
Guaranteeing that which happens.
So if it says, hey, I'm gonna provide 46 units for vouchers, and in some ways, the incentive is to the developer to do that, because the voucher payment is higher. I mean, that's why people do vouchers, is like the voucher payments.
They can't do that. You can't put them, if they advertise the unit at $1,000 a month for rent, you can't then come and say, oh, I've got a voucher and I'm gonna pay you $1,300.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way.
That's true.
They can only get, if they have 3 units and they're exactly the same, and one of them has been reserved for vouchers, they can't charge more for the voucher housing. I mean, HUD, that would be taking advantage of the program.
Yeah.
Charging the government more than you would charge a private individual.
I'm not thinking more, I'm thinking more of like like when you have the charts of like, hey, if you're committing, like, because to get like the weeds or different things, you're committing a certain amount of units at an AMI. And if you're committing, let's say an 80%, or let's say if you're committing 60% AMI, the rent payment on that would be less than what a voucher payment would be. That market, like didn't the chart have 2 different numbers? Like,
It
so,
does have 2 different
yeah,
numbers.
and they're significant. Like, so in other words, yeah, let's say if the unit rents for $1,300, normal is the normal rent. But if we in our application are committing to saying, hey, we'll do 20 units at 60% AMI, and we're willing to accept vouchers, if you rent them at 60% AMI to not vouchers, then there's a much lower maximum than what the voucher payment is. So I'm pretty sure. I think it's pretty significant.
I think what you're confused, so when you get a voucher, if you have income, you still have to pay rent. The rent that you're paying is determined by your income, the balance of which is paid for by the voucher.
Right.
So to the landlord, it's all the same money. It's just a question of how much of it did the tenant pay versus the voucher covered.
Right.
In other words, if the apartment was $1,000 and I could afford 800, my voucher's paying 2 and I'm paying 8. But the landlord still got the same $1,000 either way.
Oh, I see, yeah, and I think in the Appendix 1, maybe it's provided there just as a resource for developers. Like, here's the voucher rate, just so it's not saying, yeah, it's not necessarily in disagreement with.
And I think that's, again, where some landlords who have created affordable units aren't necessarily, can still be discriminatory against people with vouchers, even when meeting the requirements to keep the unit at an affordable level. And I think that's the sort of, if you don't have a voucher preference requirement, in other words, if there's not a voucher holder available, then you can rent it to someone else. Then people could just not have anybody on vouchers.
I think Brian's point is right on. I don't know that it directly relates to the micro unit policy, but rather anytime we're subsidizing, we really need to be thinking about this problem because it's existing throughout our community where, you know, you promise to take this many vouchers, but there's many, many ways to pass off the administrative cost of the housing voucher program and not actually follow through with the number promised. And I think it's not directly related to this specific issue because I think, you know, I think we should consider the subsidy for this potentially just because of the data that we have about how many people who do want these 1-bedroom apartments and the absolute, you know, impossibility of finding these places out in our community. You know, it's at least something we should look at. But overall, I think Brian's right to point out that, you know, the fact that they say they'll take vouchers doesn't mean we're creating 47 units that well. But I do think there are a lot of people who want to get out of project-based housing. You know, they may be similar, and we may want to encourage project-based housing from an affordable housing angle. But if you are the family, you would much rather be able to be in charge of where you live. And if your family grows, you can move in with the voucher and the subsidy. So it's a very complicated issue. But I think we should really think about that when we're making recommendations about how we're gonna, use our tax dollars and how we're gonna ensure, and not just getting the commitments from the developers, but also who's gonna follow up, because we talk about that all the time. We ask the city, they don't know. We don't keep data on that necessarily.
Well, I will say, of the two projects that we audited this winter, one, I don't believe they had any voucher holders, but the other one had about 50% of their close to 50% of their units were voucher holders. And that was close to 35 units had voucher holders. It's a 100%, 60% AMI and below project.
So for the one that didn't have any voucher holders, how many units?
It was 34 units.
So that we'd given them a tax incentive to create 34 units, none of which went to anyone who was
Holding a voucher,
holding a voucher.
but they're all income qualified.
So I have a question. The last two questions up here, one of us, will the micro units fill a need for lower income people? And then will micro apartments be attractive for people other than students and young people with lower incomes? Do we know if there is any market data that was done that can answer those two questions?
I don't, and I did ask David Moritz, who's the developer of this project, if he had some market data, he could share it with me. He said he didn't. I thought he would have some from his bank or something.
See, I think from his, some of the things that he said at City Council, I mean, he's built in Seattle and he's built in Nashville. And those are two very, very different cities than Asheville. And so I'm curious to know, will tourists come and take these 250 square foot? I mean, like, who's going to fill these up? If we don't have any market data, how does he know that these will be filled up with, is it just students and people that work downtown?
That's a good question.
Who's gonna fill them up?
And do you all have, thank you for that segue, do you all have any thoughts, are these the right, these are the questions that kind of came out of your last meeting. We can still add to these. I think it's helpful to kind of frame the discussion. Y'all we're alone, so I pasted in the payment standards just a minute ago really quick. This was an example from Durham that I found. This was their smallest unit on their website. It's an apartment complex with a mix of micro and 1 and 2 bedroom units. It's right downtown. So this is 387 square feet, starting at $1,301 a month. They do have parking, but they do charge $50 a month for it. And looking at the different indexes, because of the same thing, cities are very different.
Yeah.
Their cost of living index is very close to ours. It's actually a little bit higher, but I think we all, pretty sure our housings is more expensive.
Yeah.
But they've got other expenses. And obviously Durham has a ton of universities right there. So
They also have a lot of businesses downtown. They have a lot of
Yep.
companies that are around that we don't have in our downtown.
and I called the leasing agents. She said they're about 92% full for their micro apartments. She said it was slow at first, but it's gotten better. And I asked her who is renting them, and she said students. They have some people who, they travel all the time, like 20 days of the month. So they really don't necessarily want to have a whole house, so that works for them. And I feel like there's another group she said too. But that was just interesting. And then so I started thinking, these are some of the things you all are talking about right now. And we could just add to this list here as you're talking. So I was looking at the floor plans for the original, for one of the first micro unit project that got approved. And there's and actually the one that's on the floor right now, but there's a variety of sizes. There's a little bit of variety. So I was thinking, if you're gonna have affordable units, I'm just a little concerned. I know you all have talked about this before, about segregation. Like if this building has all the good views, right? Because this one on Aston is 2 buildings. So if this one has all the good views, don't stick all the affordable units in this other building. We want to mix it up. Requiring a market study. These are all just questions for you all. Requiring a market study for developments to show demand. This is what you all were just talking about. Should we require a percentage of the affordable units or all to be set aside for voucher holders? And there may be an impact to developers about that. That's a discussion to have. I did just see in the notes that Michelle Moore added to that HACA has committed all their project-based vouchers for now, but maybe in the future there could be some available. We did talk about this with one developer we signed an agreement with like last year, and they said, we're fine setting aside, but we would like, if we can't find anybody after 90 days, we need to be able to rent the unit, which seemed like a reasonable solution. So, and they're in the business of affordable housing, so it's not like they're not. Also limiting, I have a question here. Should we be limiting who gets the affordable units? I don't know. I don't know if this is a thing. Like, this is like the market thing. Somebody did say to me, somebody did say to me, like in other places, sometimes affordable units aren't allowed to be rented to full-time students because that's not who you're trying to target. And I don't know.
I think that would mess with the fair housing law.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think students have protection under the fair housing law. They don't.
Yeah, you can discriminate against students, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Totally. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying.
Yeah. We'll just leave some cans of PBR on the curb to keep them away.
I mean, in our city, we are baristas and restaurant workers and
Right.
can't afford to live anywhere near the places they work. And that's
Right.
a huge problem. And,
Artists.
yeah.
Yeah.
All the glass blowers to displaced out of these buildings, so that comes to mind. And then
Yeah, I mean-
we have also,
I think it's a lot easier to just say, what is your income regardless of student and artist, barista, you could be all three. I don't
yeah.
know how.
You probably are.
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah, I mean,
And Uber driver and, yeah.
And you're in a band.
right.
Exactly.
Correct. Hey, Sasha, I had a quick question, just in your glance at different units in terms of sizes. Does that also tend to break down or sort out if you've got some kind of either universal design or ADA considerations or not? I don't know, Emily, I think you've got
Yeah,
a
I'll
little
look
bit
at
of
an
experience
architect,
with
I
it,
don't know.
but just I guess if you've got, either, wider doorways or hallways, obviously that's going to kind of bump the size of your
Yeah,
unit up.
If it's a type A unit, which is almost a fully accessible unit, I
Mhm.
mean, the bathroom will get bigger.
Yeah, so it's all
And there's
proportionately,
some clearances around appliances that might affect, like, interior wall placement.
right. I'm just curious if that's, just in terms of, throwing, 220 is probably the low end minimum, but like you're saying, 387 or whatever else. And I'm assuming that's also a mix of, hey, we did a slightly nicer finish or angled this out this corner, but just in terms of ADA and access and universal design or accessibility, I would think that also might be a point of differentiation on the unit size. Or
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it would be pretty tight, like if it was like 200 square feet.
Yeah.
Difficult,
Got to be able to get dual chairs.
Right, right.
So,
yeah.
That's just a quick thought I had in terms of you mentioning seeing larger unit sizes. Again, I wasn't sure if that was an appeal to luxury of this big living room and everything else is the same, or if it's a accessibility issue as well. Just food for thought.
Many of the Luigi applications, part of their point structure, they commit to doing, I think it's 20% of their units having universal design.
Mhm.
So one of the things I think we keep coming back to from many conversations maybe is really the audit process. It's really like because we're almost like, we're kind of in ways overthinking, like not overthinking, but we're trying to change policy to make sure that the developers are doing what they said they're going to do. But really, isn't that what our audit process is supposed to do? Isn't that really, isn't that kind of already worked in? And then it's like,
No.
whose job?
So I
whose
think
job
there's
is
two
to
diff-
make sure
yeah,
that
yeah.
what they say is what they're doing?
Well, I think there's two different questions. There's that question, that's the
Mhm.
second question. The first question is kind of this question of like, do they need the money to make them affordable? Does this money that we're going to give them make the difference? Is it a good deal for the city? It's almost like a but-for test.
Yeah.
If you didn't have this money, could these still be affordable? That's, to me, that's one of the two questions. And then
Yeah.
I think the audit, I think for the policy, we assume you're gonna do what you said you're gonna do, and we will audit you.
Yeah.
But in terms of,
Because some of the conversations we're having here are basically saying, do we change this because we don't know that they're doing what they say? Which is really, isn't that really more of an audit thing on our end, like on the city's end, to make sure that they're doing it?
I don't
Like-
think any of this is because of that.
No, I mean, well, like I said, I'm looking at this complex in Nashville right now, and they've got 3 units available that are 177 square foot, 1 bath units. They rent for $1,097 a month. So that's pretty affordable for Nashville.
Yeah.
But you don't need to give them a Luigi grant to do that because it's the commercial rate. So if I had a voucher in Nashville, I could get that apartment. I didn't. So it's commercially viable. They built the building. It's only got 5 units available in the whole thing. So why spend tax dollars on it when they could take a voucher tomorrow in Nashville? Because they're just less, obviously they can, because you're devoting, because you can make 4 one-bedroom apartments
Yeah.
out of that 100, all the units they have available, they've carved it up into 4 units. They're getting $4,000 a month for what someone would normally be paying $1,800 a month.
And to that point, just going back to the value conversation you were saying before, I really think there actually could be valued higher for that reason, because the tax valuation is going to be based on your stream of incomes, right? Or your stream, the incoming rent. So if you're getting much more rent because you have 200 units that are really small, and so you only had to build a box this big,
Right.
and if it was regular apartments, you would have only gotten, I don't know, 80, I don't know how many you'd get, but, so the value could be higher. So we're actually going to be paying you more.
Yeah, I guess I look at we're trying to micromanage something I look like we're trying to micromanage micro units. Whether this works in the market is really up to and it's not up to us to hinder. Here we've got an innovative project, and it's who are we to say that this shouldn't work or could work? And if especially if the HUD standards are saying, okay, well, our voucher standards say this works for this. I get in this. That's why I look at we're dissecting one application, which is really troublesome to me, and then we're trying to micromanage potential innovation without letting the market play it out. And I know in the conversations of this, that's why I'm the enforcement I keep asking about, because one of the things that was brought up for their application is they proposed X amount of units of voucher, and during the application they were asked to increase that. So basically the developer said, okay, I will way exceed my voucher allowance to make this go through, what they're willing to commit to. And so they've already upped the amount they're willing to. The voucher can be worked for it. And I know this developer's meeting with the veterans, they're working with the veterans groups to try to do the place. So that's why I'm so confused. Is here we're trying to micromanage innovation that there's already a federal policy that says the voucher works for this. And that's why I'm confused in the conversation.
I thought the question was, and maybe I'm wrong because I wasn't here last time either, but the question is whether it will get built or not without money, without our subsidy, and whether or not this will increase voucher use.
Yeah.
Right? So we're not deciding whether the city should permit this. Right?
No. But no.
So
It's not whether they'll be built, it's whether, he has basically said publicly in several meetings, I will build this regardless.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
It's a
But-
question of, do
Yeah.
I set aside these units to be affordable with your money or not? Tara, I'm sorry.
I just wondered, who else is vying for this funding? What other developers?
Oh, it's, I probably know there's 2 or 3 coming. 2 or
Are
3 more
they-
coming. It's just,
Are they guaranteeing or committing to affordability and a certain amount of units?
you have to, yeah.
Okay.
It's the voucher thing, I think, he did agree to more. And I guess that was my question in this previous slide, is maybe that should be a requirement for micro units. I mean, really, the question is, what should we be requiring for micro units?
Can you just remind me what he's specifically agreeing to or proposing? In terms of vouchers,
Sure.
will accept them?
Yes.
Or I will set aside units and give people with vouchers preference?
He has not said accept. He has said accept, not set aside.
So a year from now, or once it's built, the units would meet the rent criteria, but there could be no one in there with a voucher. And he would meet the terms of the Luigi grant.
Correct.
Yeah,
So just because someone says,
Yeah.
I will set aside units,
Yeah.
or I will accept units, it does not mean people with vouchers will get those units. I just want
Yeah.
to make sure we're clear on that.
Yeah, so it seems like that's the part that we need to fix on our audit. It's like, it's
Well,
more
no,
change
it's
the
not an
language.
audit
You have
because it's
to-
not
has
it's
to
not
be
a
the
condition of the
agreement.
grant.
So-
Yeah, but I mean,
Set
I just
aside.
want to change our agreement on the front end, like,
Right.
okay.
I think that's the real thing, is that if we're gonna give taxpayer dollars to subsidize people to build affordable units, the people in my view, the people in the community that need those units the most are the people who are holding vouchers currently. And we have to be requiring people to accept them as a preference in order to get the grant.
Mhm.
And I think that's what David is speaking to, as opposed to, yes, it's a good idea. It's a good idea for the people who need and are holding vouchers.
Mhm.
Right, and so that gets into, I mean, I think that the nature of this conversation and what makes it different than other Luigi applications is, what are we getting as a public good in exchange for this? So typically, we're getting, with our subsidy, we're getting units that otherwise wouldn't be affordable because they would cost too much to build. We're giving them an incentive to lower their construction costs or have some sort of way of recouping their costs over time through property tax rebate, right? So in this case, we've got units that, to Brian's point, they're going to be built and they're going to rent at rates that are, meet the HUD payment standard. So what are we getting for our subsidy? That's where it feels like it really, like the commitment to a certain number of set-aside voucher units is what really makes the difference, because, he doesn't need the subsidy, ostensibly, to make the building cash flow.
Correct.
So we need something as a public good in exchange for public investment, and that looks different than when we see a more typical construction, rental project with Luigi. And that's I think the core issue, is just like, what do we get in exchange? And if we're not getting anything, then we probably shouldn't put public dollars toward it. So then the question is a commitment to accepting vouchers enough of a public good to warrant the tax abatement or tax rebate? Or do we need some other kind of commitment out of this developer that we don't normally ask for? Or not this developer, this type of unit, because we're talking about this from a policy standpoint. Do we need some different standard of public good for this type of project in order to make it worth the subsidy?
Yeah, and in my quick sort of moment of realization is we're talking about sort of we're talking about a price point, just affordability, and then it's price point affordability with the voucher element.
Right.
And that's, I guess that's the harder nut to crack of sorts of, yes, empirically, affordability, that's what it's about, and then affordability with the voucher element, that's the.
So set aside, like, is that, so if that doesn't come in the enforcement, does that come in the Luigi contract? Like, how?
Yes.
Because that's really what we're talking about. It's like,
Yes.
how do we just make sure what we're saying we want is mandated? And that's
You can't enforce anything that's not in the agreement.
Yeah, and that seems like that's not even that's not even an issue on this particular project. Like, I haven't read the Luigi contract. In my mind, that's a mandate for that should be on everyone. Like, if they're saying they're setting aside X units for voucher, that should be a guarantee. It shouldn't just be like, we'll accept them. It should be, we have to accept them, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've been doing my little research, and I've been finding out that there are some properties out here that are saying that they have affordable units, I was told that this client had a housing voucher, applied to the apartment, and was told that she had to pay a $500 application fee. And her daughter is 18, and she had to also pay a $500 application fee. So,
For the same unit or two?
it's for the same unit.
Okay.
So my thing is, these developers are still being sneaky, you know what I'm saying? They're saying that they have these affordable housing units, but are they really? Is it really being an option?
That's what I was gonna ask you, like, the next level is, if you had this set aside, what are the other roadblocks between getting somebody with a voucher in the unit?
Right, the fees that come along with it and the background checks, right? Because North Carolina doesn't even have good records and there's not consumer requirements, consumer law requirements for what kind of searches property managers do. And so we see people who shouldn't be getting screened out, get screened
A lot
out.
of apartments go in and check your credit rating, and if it's, typically they do, and if it's below a certain point,
Yeah.
then you don't get that apartment, I don't care who you are.
And I do think it is separate here because it's gonna be built anyway. I think that's a threshold question about the tax, whether it's a public good. We wanna encourage buildings of all kinds. This is not a silver bullet, this is one little part of the whole picture. We wanna encourage that. If it's gonna get built anyway, then maybe we need to have really, go down into the weeds to make sure that there are gonna be vouchers, require extra things from the developer to meet that, because this is something that's gonna get built anyway. It's gonna increase the supply and help out. But in general, I'm not sure we should do that all the time, but these are the kinds of things that are happening when we subsidize places that we don't. It's not just the audit part on the back end. It's like, what are we asking them to do, and how are we gonna enforce it? And it's gotta be in the contract up front.
Can you speak more about that? Like, why wouldn't it be, because I think a lot of the things we're talking about could apply to the entire policy for every
Well,
apartment, right? So why wouldn't you?
I don't want it to be such a requirement that's not gonna get built. I mean, and I'm on the tenant's right side. I mean, I really think we need to look at it hard and push hard for it. But, I do think it could make the difference in some cases, like how strict the requirements are on developers. I don't know. Depends on the project, but.
What is that, do the projects fill out, I mean, I'm just trying to, what is the audit like at the end of the year? When they apply, do they have to apply for they don't automatically get the money. You pay the property taxes and the wage. You have to apply for it to be rebated to you after you pay it.
Correct.
When you apply, are you filling out, is there a form that says, to get this, I'm providing this many vouchers, I'm doing this many units, and then it has to meet all of those requirements, and then the rebate is based on meeting all those?
So we look at, and it's evolving as agreements get updated, right? So really what we're dealing with are agreements that are 4 or 5 years old at this point. But we get basically a chart of all the tenants and their income and their rent, and some often income verification. So, these leasing managers have a whole thing they do. So, and there's more other pieces and parts to that. But basically, the most important thing is to see tenants' income and the rents.
So the city is seeing that information before refunding the
Yes,
taxes?
for sure.
And the tenant income is their tenant's self-reported income on their application.
Kevin left, so this is where he would be perfect for this.
In
not sure.
the Human Relations Commission, we actually just signed a suggestion to City Council to not to discriminate against people's income, because some people have alimony or child support or SSI, and that has also been a way of people being weeded out of the system, because if they get SSI or whatever, they're not allowed to get these apartments or units.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It sounds like the biggest thing we're coming back to in the discussion about this micro units is really more of an overall policy discussion about, shouldn't we be making sure, if in the upfront contracts, if the contract is based on providing this many units for vouchers and this many for affordable, to be able to get, because we have a pullback, it's like, it's not like this automatic check that they get, they have to fill out the rebate application. So how do we just make sure that the rebate application, they get the rebate once they meet all of the standards, and part of those standards means certifying that they are providing this many voucher units, this many affordable units. Seems like, I mean, that's, to me, it sounds like we're talking more about making, about a policy thing than a unit-specific thing.
I agree, because I think the core issue is that despite every community in the country creating affordable housing, the people that need the housing the most don't get into it, because it's still easy to discriminate against those people, whether it's background checks, type of income, application fees, things that they cannot, that make it more difficult for them to qualify for that unit. Therefore, the people that are on the bubble for affordability, easier for them to get in. I'm a new student, I just got a job, you know, my income's not that high, but my credit is not bad, you know, I can borrow $500 from my dad for a security deposit. All those things just come into play. And so I think across the board, whether it's Luigi, Housing Trust Fund stuff, you have to be able to put an overarching set of rules and regulations so that the people that we want to help the most get the help first versus other people, because I do believe it's a line, and you do need to make sure the people at the lower end of the scale and highest need get in first. Otherwise, this is what just causes them to become homeless. This is why we can create unit after unit, but we still have people who can't find housing and become homeless.
It's a mismatch.
Yeah, it's just that you're not. It's almost like if you ran the ER and you brought in a bunch of people and you took the healthiest ones first, right? So the sickest people, I'm helping everybody who comes in to the ER who needs urgent care, but I just took the healthiest ones first.
Right.
That's the way I look at it.
I don't disagree with any of that. I do think there's also the micro unit piece is back to that public good question. So like in the policy overall, we have a per unit subsidy cap of 80,000. Now, we don't usually get that high in a few cases, but should there be a lower, just from a philosophical standpoint, that we're not gonna, like for a very tiny unit, we're not gonna give you $80,000.
So maybe it's a third of 80,000 because these units are roughly a
Right.
third.
And that might help a little bit with
Yeah,
that
to me,
kind
that
of
makes sense to.
Although I would say the 80,000 should probably, that maximum should be for a 3-bedroom unit, right? And then scale it from 3 bedrooms down for square footage, because $80,000 subsidy on a 1-bedroom unit sounds like a big investment.
Not really, not today, based on costs. It's really not that.
What are you saying, Margie? I can't.
I'm sorry, I was just saying that 80,000 a unit, when you look at what it's actually costing to build these units, the per unit price, in today's world, today's market, that's nothing. 80,000, no, it's, most of them are somewhere 150 to 200,000, you know.
Well, for sure, it's not supposed to pay the whole cost.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but
It's
still,
gone up a lot.
it's gone up a lot,
Yes.
so, you know.
In the most recent round of housing trust fund applications that HCD looked at, the unit prices were it didn't kind of really get into bedrooms as much on it, but on all these applications, the average unit cost, I think on the low end, it was like 225, and on the upper end, 296 per unit. So all of the unit per unit construction costs were I think the average was about $265,000. Yeah. So it sounds like we have two different discussions. We have two different things. One is like an overall wage policy that we basically think it's really, there's this thing that it's really important that we have this policy we're talking about, that we should be making sure on the audit end that the developers are doing what they're saying, and that what needs to change for that. Like that seems to be, that's the Luigi policy, that if the application.
Focus on the agreement, though. Go ahead,
Okay, the
sorry.
agreement, yeah. So on the agreement, if a certain amount of units are saying they're gonna accept vouchers, that means they have to accept vouchers. And then because then we would feel, essentially, we would feel better
They have
about
to
it.
use units, they
But-
have to have people in the units using vouchers.
Yeah.
You gotta go farther down. So it's not, they're not doing what they say, we're not making them do it.
Right,
We need to make them do it.
right.
So when you go out to do your audit, checking to make sure that those people, or those units that said they would accept them, that the people in there are voucher holders.
But you're saying that it's not as much an audit, we have to make sure on the new contracts that wording is in, that a
Yeah.
have to,
Right.
not
Yeah,
a
it doesn't-
will. Is that,
Yeah, it has to be in the agreement, otherwise
Okay.
we have no basis to
Yeah.
enforce it.
yeah, so it sounds like, whether it's micro units or any kind of a
Any-
weed policy, we're saying, like,
Yeah.
that is one thing that, I mean, in my mind, I was just assumed, like, I've never, like, 'cause I've never gotten the weeds of these applications, but I always just assume that when we see these applications and they say we're gonna do 40 units voucher or 20 units voucher, that's happening, you know? And that it's, I mean, I'm not looking at the contract language, but I'm sure assuming it, that if we're doing funding based on this, that we have a process to follow through on that. So maybe we need to tighten up some contract language to make sure that's accurate, but.
Well, it needs to
And
be in the
low-income
policy, it's not in the
housing.
policy. Sorry, go ahead.
Low-income housing tax credit projects
Mhm.
are really good at doing that. They have property managers in place that make
Yeah.
sure that is enforced, because, I
Yeah.
mean, you can lose not only funding, but also the property if you do not do that.
Got it.
But this is not.
It seems
I
easy.
know that's not, but it's
Yeah.
a good example, and
Right.
it's a good,
Template.
you know,
Possible.
just a template, yes, to be able to, consider our policy from.
Sure.
It seems easy for a developer just to kind of say, well, we would have allowed it, but they didn't meet our credit check. They had the background checks didn't go well. And then we're up at like the same old roadblocks of where we've been over policing in project communities and, cause people to have records. And so, yeah, like, do you just allow it, or are they really there? Are they, are voucher holders actually living there? Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen the audit process, but like, it seems like if I don't know how much the city does or the developer does, but it seems like if I had a project and I was accepting 40 units, I can go to the housing authority, and part of my application, I need to submit like a report to say that I've used this many. But so I don't know, maybe that's where our contract and our audit process needs to just assure that the things that we're trying to design as policy are actually carrying through and not getting watered down.
So they have a leasing manager in the, in the building, but you're saying that in your example, the housing authority plays a role in management of leasing?
So actually, with us in our tax credit properties, we have, for the first 3 years, it's required that a professional property management group come in and oversee that.
And that's true for all tax credit. I mean, they have to have an outside person there to manage the property and to
Okay.
do all this paperwork.
And they have the expertise.
And they have the
We
expertise.
do not.
So they don't lose their subsidy.
That's right.
It's really somebody who knows how to cross all the Ts. dot all the
But if you
Is.
have a complex that is not tax credit, there's no, they don't have people.
There's no enforcement.
There's no enforcement whatsoever, and they don't have to have any enforcement.
I think we should maybe look at some other places that do this, because I do worry that there's gonna be, the costs are gonna, like, what we're talking about requiring them to do, I don't think they're gonna be happy about, right? I mean, I think it's one thing to say we take them, that's real easy, but if you ask them to manage their property in the way you want them to, use background checks in the way you want them to, and keep a certain amount of units, like, with voucher holders in them, and measure things that way, I think it's gonna be a different application. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, we should, but we can't just we have to look at how to do it differently than we're doing it now.
Maybe
And
we
there's
say,
a lot of concessions that
Yep.
would have to be made.
like, no security deposit, you don't have to pay an application fee for these people that have vouchers so that they can get in there.
Look back times for criminal background checks,
Right.
all kind of concessions that I
Yeah.
think that they would balk at.
And so that was going to be my question, was how do we address those barriers to entry that may end up keeping those people out of those units? And can that be mandated upfront in those contracts. And so that's what you're speaking to right now, is that may be a deterrent to those developers in and of itself.
But I think when we, if you make these requirements and developers aren't willing to move forward, it shows you that the money that you're spending isn't being spent and achieving your objectives.
Right.
I think what we do now is people come in and they say, well, oh, I'm building a 200-unit building. I'll tell you what, you give me an extra $5,000 a unit and I'll accept vouchers on all of them, right? With knowing full well they're not going to fill their place up with vouchers, right? I mean, I think, but we all go like, ooh, wow, what a great use. We gave an extra $5,000 a unit, and now all 200 units are voucher holders, and it's not. We look back 5 years and there's no voucher holders in the building. I mean, that's the cruel reality of this, and so it does go back to, does all of this money we spend meet the objective we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, and in the micro unit case, the sole real reason to do it would be to get increased voucher participation.
Right.
So if that is the reason we're doing it, then we have to be able to
Sure.
catch it. And we might be doing it for other reasons, in different proposals, different projects. But this one, we kind of said, like, it's gonna go anyway, it's gonna be affordable anyway, so the voucher thing is.
A developer would understand that though, right? If you said like, yeah, we would be willing to subsidize or, but we'd have to make sure, I mean, it's a reasonable request. And we think in order to do that, we're gonna have to have some, background checks, these concessions that we're discussing, like, because we can look back at other projects and say, like, this is what's happened in the past with these other projects, and this is why we're looking at this one, or not this one, but the policy that'll drive it. I don't know, I think it's reasonable, especially for someone who's so publicly very, very proud of the fact that they're going to have affordable, units and, put your money where your mouth is.
Here are the additional things that we're going to do to ensure that we can have these affordable units and that we can help the population that we're trying to help. We're gonna reduce the barriers to entry, we're gonna reduce the application fees, we're gonna,
And we have the built, like, what's unique about Luigi is we have a built-in annual hook in it. Like, it's not an automatic, there's nothing automatic about getting Luigi. You pay, like, the developer pays the tax bill, and then they have to apply for a rebate. So it seems like we have every ability to ask for whatever documentation
It's just a matter of
yeah.
checking and balancing the existing checks and balances.
Yeah, yeah.
Because couldn't it be like what you're saying, Barry, is on that rebate application, if they say there's 10 units, they have to put those 10
Sure.
families' names,
Yeah.
or whatever it is,
Yeah.
so that we could measure or, checks and balances.
Yeah.
Because something needs to be done.
So I heard, looking what other cities do that have these requirements, which I think is a great idea. And also, as you're all talking about these different barriers, it strikes me that surely somebody has figured some of this out, right? Because there are people in units in Asheville, right? Not as many as there should be. A lot of people can't find units, but for the people who are finding units, I don't know if we would know, but I mean, are those units still have those fees or the background? You know what I'm saying? Like, I guess, do we feel pretty certain that, I might be answering my own question here, but do we feel pretty certain that the people who don't find units are facing the barriers that the other ones can overcome, kind of thing? Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
So from what I've learned is that sometimes if a client is linked to an organization, okay, so I used to work for a domestic violence agency, right? Those clients got preference, or me calling for them and being able to pay their security fee helped them to get those units, even though they have a voucher. So people
They didn't
who
necessarily have the fee themselves.
yeah, so people who have assistance or have resources can get over those barriers. But if you don't have the resources or have the connections, those barriers are a problem.
That's a great point, because there are a number of, whether it's domestic violence and the homeless agencies, they're providing the support to help people get through this. And that support is managing the applications, themselves sometimes paying the fees, paying the security deposits, and without, so just because we do get some voucher holders in doesn't mean the system worked. It just means a bunch of nonprofits spent a bunch of money to provide the grease to make it work.
And there's something in the works that, to simplify it a little bit, there's like you've heard about the one application process, you know, so Just Economics is working on that, is getting involved, trying to make sure that there could be, so we could require that they accept that, right? And that would take care of some of the policy parts that we don't really want to, you know, try to consider at city council level, but I think hopefully that's going to happen this summer, and that way there will be one fee, it'll be waived based on income, and hopefully a lot of places will accept this application so people aren't having to apply and pay 5 times, 6 times. So Thrive, Just Economics, a lot of organizations are trying to get that together, so hopefully that'll help.
Well, and if that became like, I don't know, if the city would need to vet that, we could make that a requirement.
Right.
Use this standard.
Yeah, I mean, we can put that into everything now, is when it becomes viable, you will accept this one application that the city adopts. Even if we don't have it in place now, every new agreement we should write, we have to do this tomorrow, you can say they just have to do it when it becomes available, even if it takes us 5 more years to get it done.
Okay, so it sounds like we have some good specific Luigi policy stuff that needs to get tightened up, which was good, which is part of whether we're being asked for it or not. Some really important things, because that also does play into part of our other Luigi conversations, like ways to design for smaller projects, like, because maybe like right now Luigi is an all or nothing. It's a 20-year, like you apply for 20 years, you get the grant each year for 20 years. There is no way to say for smaller landlords, like Thrive, I know Thrive has had this issue, there's no process to say, hey, I want to try this for 3 years, and maybe like if there's an annual certification, that makes it easier to say, well, you can get the rebate for the years that you do this, you know, so it might be a way by tightening up the policy. As long as it sounds like on our view, we would just want to make sure the policy is doing what it's meant to, which means accepting vouchers and providing, you know, the rent, and then it's up to us in the contract language and the enforcement to make sure that's happening. But it's, you know, it sounds like that's the.
It's all policy.
What's that?
It's all policy.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
rest of that will follow.
Yeah, it's policy, but it's like I've never seen a Luigi app. Like I know we go from policy to then like the applicant, like the contracts are like a different, I guess the wording in the contract doesn't always connect with the intent of a policy, right? I mean, that happens. I mean,
So do we have to make a policy to say that the contracts should be tighter?
No.
Because
the
it seems
contract
like
will follow the policy.
if the contract was tighter,
Yeah.
then the public benefit, the benefit would be given.
yeah.
If the public good would, there'd be no public tax dollars given to these, they wouldn't get a rebate if they weren't meeting the requirements of the contract.
But right now, the requirements say they take vouchers, not that
Right.
50% of the units have. So we need to change the policy to.
So, right, so the policy needs to say
Yeah.
that the
Explicitly.
contract should be.
It's funny as I'm having this deja vu. I'm thinking about all this times about, you'll relate to this, that the planning department in the city creates all these rules and these policies, but then they're carried out by development services. And there's so much disconnect. Like, so the intent of a planning policy may be so pure at heart, but then the enforcement of it, unless the details are all connected, doesn't really carry through. And we're basically hearing a little bit about this because we're a policy body. We think we're designing policy that is making sure that if this is 46 units, then by golly, those 46 units are going to accept vouchers. And now we're hearing, well, there's a disconnect in this. So I guess it's up to us to make sure that the policies, the things that we're saying are really important policy, have a way to carry through all the way to the end. And that seems to be a recurring thing that we find is all very important to us.
I really disagree with that, sorry, but it's not that, accept means you don't have to take them. Or accept means if they don't qualify for other reasons, you don't have to take it. That's.
Occupancy rate's just different from, being willing, so we need to get that in there.
It's the policy language that's the problem, it's not the enforcement or the contract. The contract follows whatever the policy.
Sure.
So your example earlier, we had 2 Luigi projects. One had 0 100% vouchers in it, the other had 50%, both are in compliance
Mhm.
based on the contract that they had.
Yes.
It
Based
just-
on the policy that was in place.
Based on the policy and the contract we wrote with both those people, the one who has 0% voucher holders in it
Yeah.
is in compliance and gets its rebate.
So if we apply that, like, so let's say, and again, I know we're not supposed to be talking about this specific application, but we're brought to this because of a specific application. And that application for micro units was asked for the Luigi to increase the amount of voucher acceptance. And so they basically, so the applicant was asked to increase the amount of, and it was to 40,
Acceptance.
to accept. So basically so now if we put this whole discussion view into like, well, that's, for what we really want to change the language is it has to get the rebate. So if now we look at this conversation of this whole micro housing, if let's assume the language is it has to accept that. It's not a
It's not a commitment.
It's not.
Don't say accept.
It's not
It's not a commitment, so, I mean, that's the loophole.
Yeah.
The language of commitment is the loophole.
Yeah, so let's change that. So let's just say
It has to
if,
be in practical application
Yes.
in terms of, this is what you said you were gonna do, and it
Yeah.
has to be this, instead of a commitment toward vouchers.
so why don't we ask the applicant, like, Yeah.
Set aside.
Yeah.
It's
Set
set
aside.
aside.
Or even better, per voucher a year you have in your building. So if you've had a voucher holder in there, you get a rebate for that unit.
Right.
So if we're gonna give them, $1,000 a unit a year, if you only had 2 units that had vouchers in them, you get $2,000.
right,
If you had 20, you get $20,000. I mean, make it on the result.
right.
And then they, as business people, will go like, oh, in order to get these voucher people, will not have to do as extensive a criminal background checks or lower requirements. We'll have to lower our application fees. We'll actually have to contact the housing authority and market to people because we want the rebate for economic purposes.
Yeah.
If you do it on results,
Sure, totally.
it makes it a lot easier, and it makes the audit process easier, because it's basically, give me the tenant, and I can cross-check it back with the housing authority if they were in your building for the year.
Right. Yeah, that's what it seems like. If they're saying the Luigi grant is, let's just say $100,000 a year in tax rebate, and we're saying that they're supposed to be providing 42 units, and how can the policy say, well, they'll only get 100% of that if they provide 42, if they can show on that year's application that they're providing 42 voucher units. If they're only providing 20 voucher units, then they only get, 50% of it. Like, how do we make that the solid commitment in their refund application? That if they're saying they have, how do we make that they have to provide that? And then would I guess that is a question, would the developer, if you went back, would he be willing to commit to that? So because in their mind, they might be already thinking they are. We might be overthinking this loophole thing. We might not have.
I think they're laughing all the way to the bank.
They did, they're like, oh, and they came back again and said, give me more of them. They would say, sure.
They still are accepting lower rents, though. We all understand this, right? They still have 20% of their units. I'm not defending, whatever.
Yeah.
They still are accepting lower rents and have a lower rent income. We all understand
whole
that.
But it's guaranteed though.
Yeah.
It's
We're
guaranteed.
talking right now about voucher use, and that
Yeah.
is a
No, I
huge-
understand. I understand. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I think we're talking specifically voucher unit because that was the ask. That was the ask in their application was like, well, what if you made them all vouchers? So, and we're saying, okay, and they, they said, yeah. So now we're saying, okay, well, we would just want to mandate that and that you don't get the tax rebate each year unless you prove that you did. And then, because then our whole conversation about amount of rebate is very different if we know that what we're getting is guaranteed. So, I think that's almost like the big question, is the difference of you're accepting a lower than size unit, if you're willing to commit to say you 100% will provide it to vouchers, does that make us all feel better about the unit size being different?
So does that mean
that's a
that,
good question.
Yeah.
does that mean if a developer comes to Asheville and it's not a tax credit project, it's a market rate, and they say that they'll do X% of, you know, affordable, but they won't do vouchers, does that mean they cannot get any city money?
I think she's asking you.
I'm
Yeah,
asking
I mean,
you.
well, it's kind of like, that's a policy, I mean, I think we're all talking about, you know, the point of entry is affordability, and then with that affordability, it's either voucher or no voucher, right? Is that kind of
We have
the,
given money to market rate
right,
developers
right,
that don't accept vouchers in the past.
right. And
And
ostensibly, you're still, I mean, I guess you're getting toward the goal of the affordability, the price point, but you're not, to this other discussion, you're not getting at that element.
They have, 10% or 15% affordable, but they are not doing the voucher part.
Right.
So, like, what is that? I'm just trying to think ahead of what developers
Yeah, I
are
mean,
gonna do.
I guess it would, I mean, it could be a two-tiered system of the incentive of, hey, you're coming in and you're gonna do, you know, pure affordable, but no voucher, you get this multiplier of incentive. You're gonna do 100% voucher or 50% voucher, you get this multiplier of incentive. I mean, it's,
The thing-
Detailing that policy out.
The thing to keep in mind with vouchers, I mean, part of it is what Brian was saying about how do we really serve the folks who have the greatest barriers to housing. The other piece of it is the cost effectiveness, right? If we increase the number of units that are available to people holding vouchers, we increase the amount of federal affordable housing dollars that are flowing into our community, which means we can put in this much money to get this much money of federal dollars that right now is sitting on the sidelines because people can't use the vouchers that have been allocated to us, right? So there's two pieces, right? When we think about making it easier to use vouchers, we're actually being more fiscally responsible with the subsidy dollars that the city puts in, right? Because it's a fraction of what's coming out. Otherwise, we have to turn around later and do, we have to more deeply subsidize a unit to get it to a rent threshold that is, that's affordable, to someone at that lower income level without a voucher, right? And the money that Washington thinks it's spending on Asheville is still sitting in a bank account somewhere in Washington. I don't know what they do with that. But I just imagine that all of that
Yeah.
unspent voucher money
It's
is
a giant
just
pool of money.
it's-
And it's a count all of its own.
sorry,
Is there a limit, Tara, on what they will give us each year, or what, I think there is.
Usage.
A limit.
You can't get more until you use what you got. Well, you
So-
already did.
were you saying by virtue of higher and greater voucher usage, that actually can have a flywheel effect in the larger ecosystem of sorts?
Well, you could apply for more, if we used every
Yeah.
voucher we could, we could apply for more vouchers.
Right,
But we
right,
can't
yeah.
apply for more vouchers, because you're not using the ones you got.
Okay.
So
Like-
communities that are effective at getting people with vouchers into housing
Right.
can get more money for the people who need housing vouchers.
Okay, so we need to move on to some of the other stuff, but it sounds like one of the big, like, we had there was some really important meat to put into that policy thing, and it sounds like we can probably ask that, we can, and, because there's also this one thing that your conversation just brought into mind, meaning, if we can create more usage of vouchers, that creates more funding, and smaller micro units probably have a chance to create more vouchers to be used, especially if we say they have to be committed to it. So it sounds like maybe we need to ask the developer if in the language they would be willing to, by committing those 46 or 42 units, that they're willing to commit them, not just set aside. Because then we know if, it sounds like that would make the biggest difference in this whole conversation about micro units.
I think it's a difference of may versus shall.
Yeah, exactly.
You may set
Yeah,
aside X for vouchers,
Yeah.
or you shall.
You shall.
X.
Yeah.
And I really like your tiered approach idea.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's,
it's-
because, I always get confused when I start looking at these numbers, Tara. So right now, there's 124 families looking
Yeah.
for units. So if we had 46 new units, and they, you know what I mean, at a certain point, I guess we'll get more. There's a numbers thing
Yeah.
going on there.
Yeah.
But so since we have till next meeting to make this, so can we find that out? That way because that way if they came back and like, hey, we're willing to commit to it, it's a different conversation what we're gonna have about the size of the units.
Well, I don't want you to, well, I'll just speak for myself. I don't want you to design your policy recommendations around this one developer. I
Sure.
think
Well,
if
no,
you
no,
all-
no, no, no,
Okay.
this is more of a this is the idea of like, in my mind, actually in my mind, of all of our conversations, we're talking about Luigi policy, and when we have voucher amounts, in my mind, that is always happening. Like, so when I hear about it's not, then I'm like, well, what is the disconnect? Like, I didn't know the difference of this may and the shall. I'm assuming everything we're doing is shall, not may.
Whether it's micro units or not.
Yeah,
it's-
right,
it's
right,
Every,
right.
every unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was been always my assumption of it. And, so if it,
If a developer goes to city council and says they'll provide this many vouchers,
Yeah.
then the language needs to be in there that
Yeah.
they're.
I think this has been a problem both probably within council and a lot of people in the community. Everyone's been taking these will accepts as, yes, we just are housed,
Sure.
46
And that's
people.
a may.
And it's unfortunately, it's a misconception that really, it doesn't bear out reality.
Well, council has noticed it, and they've made comments several times. They've been concerned about the may versus shall
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
for a while now, so.
But then it's also too, if we have 46 unit efficiencies or micro units, do we have 46 people or families that are gonna have
That can
46
live
efficiency
in there.
vouchers?
Right.
Because we also had that conversation that some people might not have an efficiency voucher, they might have a 4-bedroom voucher, they might have a 3-bedroom voucher, so that still doesn't take care of the problem. And how many people do we go down the road, because we were also asking about that last time, who will get that efficiency voucher? How many people do we skip? How many people need that request?
Well, it is, I mean, as you can see by the numbers there, what the need is.
Yeah, for
And-
1-bedroom, not an efficiency.
Right, well, oh, that's what you're talking about specifically.
Yeah.
It'd be good to isolate, like to have a, survey or some data on how many of those people would move into a micro unit.
Exactly.
I don't, I
Not
can guess
everybody
on
can do that.
anecdotes. Of course, right, some people are not going to be interested in that. But I think there's a lot of people who would be, just based on my experience in working with tenants, low-income tenants and subsidized housing here in Asheville, project-based housing, I think there's a lot of people who would like to move. But I don't know. I mean, I don't.
I would also be shocked if the developer was willing to commit to 46 units.
Agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
My
what we,
guess, if you made them commit to a firm number, it's gonna be 5 or 10.
but that's what we can, I mean, I think you bringing this up is vital, right? Because everyone's in agreement that if they're talking about vouchers, that we need to do more than just say, all right, you can promise that and then never advertise to the communities and never, never get pushed on how many people are in there. So we can try to address that more for you.
Or could the conversation be vouchers and affordable? Because everyone doesn't have a voucher, everyone doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
And we talked about a waiting list last time, so some people don't have a voucher but have income, but still need that low payment, that could be an option.
According to the Citizen Times reporting on this specific project that we're kind of using as a,
Discussion point.
test case, discussion. All of the units would be affordable, so 100% of them, so.
Okay.
But, again, that we're creating a policy that's supposed to apply, and also that's just what he's saying on to the news.
well,
Well,
let's, we have a couple other things on the agenda. So it sounds like we have a question to ask by the shall versus the shall versus may. So that once that comes back, then we can have a different, but I think this is a really good conversation about this Luigi policy in general, because that's the discomfort of the policy that we have, that council has, and everyone has. And so,
But we have to have a final recommendation May 4th. So at our next meeting, so.
Specific to
Specific to.
micro units?
Yes, that is correct.
all right. So next up, we have some updates, and they were provided written. Any questions, or do you want to?
I don't think I got build and connect task force.
I think Bill, main thing we met, but it was really more talking about trying to hash out who's gonna,
Who's gonna run?
yeah, the leadership.
Yeah, that was all Connect's conversation is.
Would it connect, do the same?
Yeah, we did meet, we're still working on, actually ways to get input from the community on a lot of the things that we just talked about today. So how do we really assess, as we're bringing into these conversations about Blue Beach, what the community of people who need and use affordable housing, how they would prioritize all of this.
So did you come up with a method of
We have
reaching out to the community?
We are very close to having a method for doing that data collection and some folks that we want to talk to, and we want to run that by city staff before we make any moves forward on that. So that'll happen next month.
Super quick for the city, CDBG and home funding allocations have been recommended. CDBG will be on council on May 9th. We're in the middle of the housing trust fund right now. And we will be at HCD next Tuesday, virtual meeting. You heard at the beginning, we got a draft RFP for the affordable housing plan. I sent it to the 4 folks who volunteered. I don't want it like publicly floating around before I release it, so, but and maybe, Andy, some of your conversations around data, I don't know if they would feed into this RFP at all. What else? 319, Fillmore submitted its plans to TRC last month, and it will set TRC technical review committee on the 17th of April. Keep my months straight here, it's tons. So they're kind of headed towards, if that goes well, they'd be headed towards a May P&Z, which is the first Wednesday, possibly city council by May 23rd.
There were no questions, no issues about what they were gonna do or anything like that?
Well, nothing's happened yet.
Oh, okay, so I'm sorry, I thought you said it went to TRC.
It's going.
It's going.
That's right, Chris is working on that project. I mean, I think in an ideal world, it would be more activated. There is an active retail front on one of the buildings.
And they're accepting vouchers,
They're working with HACA to have project-based vouchers.
project-based vouchers.
And 30% of the units will be affordable. And they've got a mix of a good bedroom mix. And 20% will be at 60%, because that's part of our bond requirement. So 20% of the units will be at 60% AMI. And I did put in this updates document just for you all. There's a bunch of things happening on a statewide level right now around affordable housing bills. We're in the long session of the legislature, and I put a link in here at the bottom. Last Thursday's council briefing, our city attorney gave it's kind of ended up being kind of long legislative update to city council. The majority of it was spent on affordable housing issues and bills in the legislature. So some's good, some's bad.
There's a whole lot of state legislation in this time, and some meaty stuff, which is really good to see. Like, I don't know how many of y'all follow it, but there's the workforce housing bill, and then there's a commercial permit bill. There's a couple of different ones that some technical things, but a big one is pretty much like making duplexes by right in every single family zoning. That's one of the pieces. That was a big piece of it. Another one that was a standout, which doesn't really work here as well, was like there's some standards set for like housing projects, but it set a minimum to try to make sure it got across the board support. It was made for a minimum of 10 acres of projects. And so, how many 10-acre sites do we have here in the city? So it was one that was like, well, I was reading through it, I was like, this is great. And then I was like, 10 acres? Like, where does this work? Like,
Not mountain specific.
yeah.
Sometimes you'll see in these bills, things around, like the city doesn't have a choice but to approve the project. And sometimes that can be, well, we lose all zoning authority in certain cases, and that can be problematic. Like we've got steep slope laws is tree canopy, things like that, and they all go out the window. So, you know, the city would prefer to have local jurisdiction over our own.
I bet they would.
We do right now. That's it for updates. And then, so at the end of this month, speaking of missing middle, the Downtown Association is bringing in Out to Coast Design, who is our consultant for missing middle study, to give kind of a talk. So it's kind of almost being treated like a kickoff to the study, but it's not a city event. Tickets are free. It's going to be at the Collider on the old, I still call it Rocco, the
Yep.
Wells Fargo building on the 3rd floor. They do fill up if you want to go. The advisory committee's meeting that day.
Anything you want to share from
Uh,
from the Miss Middle?
No, I'm really just, things are scheduled, but in terms of any substantive content from either the city or the consultant, just haven't gotten to that point yet, to my knowledge. I'm on the working group representing this group, but yeah, looking forward to it. So we'll see what happens.
I went to, I was on a coach last week, and I went to Wilmington. I walked up to their CD office and said who I was, and met with their affordable housing officer, who was Paul's mentor, Paul, for years. And so I sat down with two of their staff and the affordable housing director for about an hour, and they're like, I just wanted to hear what are you doing? And they have some. I'm really impressed. Mainly they have a down payment assistance program that they administer. They partner with banks. But the other thing, which I was really fascinated with, and this is stuff that I think how we work in, especially missing middle study and things to fast track. They actually have a ADU loan program.
Huh.
So if you wanted to build an ADU in your backyard, there's a loan program that would lend, as long as you're willing to rent it for affordable standards. They had a loan construction program for up to 90% of the value.
Oh.
So it had some incredible tools.
This is in Wilmington?
Yeah, Wilmington, and then the down payment assistance loan. They've had the same. It was pretty generous, what it goes up to. So I was going to refresh my look at it. I remember back when we had the down payment assistance conversation so long ago that never happened. That was based on Wilmington, and because Paul was part of the one who made the Wilmington one happen, and it was a partnered program with banks. The city basically underwrote it to the banks, and it's become now kind of almost like a leveraged fund of itself. So it was really neat to see. They're having the same problems. Their cost is home cost in Wilmington is similar to here. So they're having the same issue that even the down payment assistance programs that are designed, the housing stock doesn't exist for them. But they have had tools that have had work, and now they're basically looking at how to adapt that house remodel program to work for ADUs, and that I thought was fascinating. I've never heard that in the country. So when she said, yeah, if you came here and build ADUs, we would fund in people's backyards up to 90%. And I was flabbergasted.
Did they say how long it had to be affordable for?
I didn't get into the nitty gritties, whether it's a shall or a may. But I'd never heard that in the country other than, so I was really fascinated by it. And then to know Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah. We're doing, we're doing it. My company's doing a private ADU study around the state. We're researching, we're putting together a document from every city, every of the large municipalities in the state of what their ADU policies are, and so that was how the Wilmington one came to be. I'm like, this one's interesting. So anyway, that's my soapbox. Any other?
It's here, the Board of Realtors has a affordable housing.
Just pull the
Board of Realtors has a affordable housing committee, and we've connected with community leaders in PVA, Maple Crest, Hillcrest, and the Eddington Center, and are doing educational outreach programs in the evenings. The first one is April 13th, others in May, June, and August.
So what do you?
Yeah, so everything from like rental assistance to homeownership, down payment assistance, representatives from, bankers and agents and, let's see, maybe
Credit
Thrive.
repair,
What's that?
credit.
Oh, yeah, on track representative will be there. So trying to hit kind of all the housing, roadblocks or, connection points. And we've had bigger fairs in the past where we would have a huge room with lots and lots of people, and we want to probably continue doing that, but we think that maybe a smaller, more, focused effort is going to be more effective. So we're trying it. Tommy Seho is leading the charge on that and is doing an amazing job. So.
That's great. Any other updates? The housing data, the reports I've attached about the housing stock, how low, that again, we're ridiculously critical inventory. One of the new things, I didn't put it up, but one report I think I'm going to start adding in is I've observed in the market, what I've observed is how fast land is going under contract now at record paces. And so the cost of land is skyrocketed. And so what I've observed, and we buy a lot of land, we look at it, but I was flabbergasted by looking at now the data report. So right now in the city of Asheville, there's less than $100,000. There's only one buildable lot at the moment. And there's so the list has about 7, but I've vetted every single one of them for clients, and all of them are not one of the lots is one that you can go pull a building permit on, except for the one lot under $100,000. Everything else needs a sewer extension, needs a road extension. So the lots, they're not buildable without having developer experience and additional cost. So of the lots under $100,000, only one was one you can buy and pull a building permit on, and I've never seen that ever. But I've been watching, as I watch every day, the amount of the new listings that come on for houses and land, and the amount that go under contract, and I've watched what's happening is the land is goes under contracts. There's so much land going under contract every day.
Is that because investors, developers, people that are not individuals are buying it?
I think it's also a mix of showing, because I was texting Padilla over the weekend, our policy is not catching up. Basically, I think we just don't have enough ways to create land, and we're now being tied up in example of the 7 under $100,000, if 6 of them are not buildable because we don't have sewer infrastructure running to them, or it's close by but it would cost a private funds to do it, or it needs a right-of-way developed, so you got to follow a city right-of-way standard. So I think what we're finding is here's lots that could be developed, but what's making them not developed is that the private person has to pay to run the infrastructure, private person has to pay to run the right-of-way for one building lot, and it doesn't work. So I think it's, and I think on that, that's a small scale, but I think it shows that we've got some, in our city policies, we've got some right-of-way standards that need to get adjusted and really need to look at, because that is definitely hindering and driving cost up. And then the MSD, which we talked about many times. But I thought.
Any observations about the county, or did you just look specifically?
I looked at the county some too. The county, what's different about the county, is the county does not have, a lot of county land does not have the same infrastructure. So you just can't develop dense the same way out in the county. There was a few parcels, because I looked at them all. There's a few parcels out there. Because first thing I did with the 10, seeing that there's a change that could happen for 10, first thing I did is I looked at, show me every piece of 10 acres or more for sale in the whole area, and there was 2. Yeah. But I think it's just this, this. I know policy takes time, but sometimes we're in this is we know we're in crisis mode, but I've never seen the land like this, and this is land creation and subdivision of lots is something that city policy affects. We need, if it opens up more and we make it easier on right-of-way standards and subdividing, more land opens up. And there is, I was shocked. I was, it was,
Is the 375 still a good number? Because we started looking at houses that were 275 or 250. So now we moved it up to 375. How is that going?
there's nothing. No, I'd say the average sale price of a house now in Asheville is $540,000. Yeah, that's why when we look at like those applications for housing trust funds that came in, and the average unit price for affordable construction for an apartment was almost $269,000. That says a lot.
A quick procedural question. So Barry, you generate all this data every month, correct?
Yeah.
Who's going to do it when you roll off?
He's going to keep doing that. He isn't going away. He's going to keep doing
The
that.
data, I mean, as long as I'm on the committee, I provide that as like generally it's been the real estate. Like I did it as being a broker, so anyone who's a broker could generate it. So I could show her
Oh, you're not perfect.
how to do it, but it's the one I've always generated
It's
from being.
it's whoever on the committee has access to the MLS. That's the short answer.
Does anyone on the committee have access to the MLS?
He does.
Oh,
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, you do as well. Shouldn't raise your hand.
I was like, it's me, but no.
But I can train, yeah, before and I have no, and I go, there's change, like, I have no idea when I'm rolling off because there's changes in dates or something now, but I'll be willing to provide them here.
You're staying on that committee, you're just not going to be in leadership, right?
Yeah, until I go, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And I, in just the disclosure bit, like I've waited, I have 2 pending housing trust fund applications, which is why I really wanted this leadership off my hat. So there's no question of anything feeling weird. Okay, that's what I got on the data, and I'm gonna start adding on that land thing because that's a new critical point.
It's a good metric.
Sounds like next item, we've confirmed our meetings for Thursdays, 9:30, so we're good with that. And then the events, yeah, that one you talked about, that Optimus.
I just want to thank you all. That was like, I think, the most productive discussion we've had in a long time. We've had some great meetings, but that was super helpful to me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any public comment?
I think the right meeting to come to, this was very robust. And, wow, the difference between may and shall, I was under that same assumption,
Yeah.
definitely. And I'm wondering.
Just quickly chime in with your name.
For the record.
My name's Kelly Allen. I'm the owner of Cumbie and Troll Real Estate School, and I'm currently teaching an elective to over 3,000 realtors on crunch, the housing crisis, and missing middle. So I'm very interested in this topic. It was really great to hear from all of you, and I'm excited to learn more about your initiatives. I'm wondering if the policy coming from Biden's administration on affirmatively forwarding the Fair Housing Act has reached your radar yet. Anybody read up on that?
It's on the radar, but we haven't.
Okay, so there's some federal policy to watch for that other states and municipalities are passing as their own bits of legislation so that future presidencies can't override what the current presidency has passed. So it's something to keep an eye on. But I want to thank you for all the information and all the initiatives. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kelly.
Anybody else? No public comment's been submitted? Right. Okay. Cool. I guess we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
The what? Oh, so they changed, so it used to be. It used to be 45 minutes every month.
Reach out to you soon. Have a good day.
So I haven't seen it
Bad job, just hold them right out of it. Come on, let's go. Here we are. Yeah, it's you. It's COVID. Yeah.
Or had a, we used to say, have to say.
Yeah. Look at you, I'm sorry. Here it You look fabulous.
So Amy, do you want to get together at some point? Just wing it, I think.
Yeah, he's working on it. Pretty far along. Well, what we've done, basically, what we've done is compile. Yeah, what we did is, what we did.
I just don't want, everybody gets busy during the summer, and I don't know who's gonna do whatever, but we need to start. And I think we need to contact at some point officials. We need to get with Sage and make sure they know that we're the people gonna be doing this, and how do we connect with them, which is different than the way we connect with them. And so we need to do a launch or something. But trying to get their attention on this. So. I don't think he's getting as much with Sage as he was.
Exactly. Laying out the facts. Laying out the facts. Exactly.
The handoff. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't really understand why they're going to.
It is.